Welcome to our video on the settings and parameters in our Panorama software. I'm using Panorama 1 Professional. So when we create a new panorama, this settings window opens, and this settings window is what we're here for. If you aren't using the professional version, you won't see a couple of settings. For instance, some of the projection methods aren't included. Advanced settings also has a few missing options. Let's see what we have. We basically have 6 projection methods. The first one up here is spherical, then cylindrical, Mercator, which is the map projection. Then we have fisheye, stereo or little planet, and the planar projection. These projections are the distortions for our stitched panoramas. Generally, the vast majority of panoramas are assembled on a sphere, which is why the default setting up here is spherical. The images are then stitched together within this sphere. And these processes are our projection methods. If we select the projection method planar, this is a very special method because this method keeps the images straight. The other methods here curve and project the images as necessary. The planar method leaves the images straight. I'll show you what I mean by that in a moment. Let's load a panorama in this planar mode. Before that, I'm just going to set the memory model to reduced. I'm doing that to speed things up a bit in this video. We'll be looking at this again. We'll look at all these settings and discuss them briefly in a bit. Let's load some images. Let's take the first 4 images of our port in Malta. And then we'll see what this kind of planar projection looks like and why you shouldn't use too many images in these planar projections. We can notice the effect a little here. The images in the middle are slightly compressed, and the images on the outside are pulled apart or projected apart, but with straight lines. And if we zoom out a little here, if we had another image to the left and right, we would already need roughly all this area because those images will go down at a very sharp angle here. With that in mind, I want to say right from the start, if you're using planar projections, please either use a computer with enough RAM, so 16 gigs or more, or just use a few images. Another side effect of planar projections without the curved projection, as we see here, is that the horizon is also curved, just like it does when you move the camera sideways to take shots. We're now going to make the same panorama again with the spherical projection. To do so, I just click the sphere here, spherical projection, go down here and click the function open again. Now the exact same images are calculated together to make a panorama, but with our new settings. That lets you try out different settings on the same images. And now we see that our rectangle feels much better in the spherical projection, and our horizon is also straight. That's the basic difference between the projections, the way the finished panorama is stitched together. Let's go back to the window and look at the other settings. Up here we have automatic corrections, automatic cropping, and automatic horizon correction. The horizon correction can only be used when automatic cropping is switched on. Why is that? Well, if you stitch a panorama together without any cropping, you get these black mismatched areas on the outside, areas that are basically missing. And if we now applied horizon correction to that, it would find a huge number of lines, all these black contours, and aligning the horizon will be completely impossible. So the image first has to be cropped, and the horizon can then be adjusted automatically. But if you haven't activated cropping, you can't click that at all. In that respect, it's taken out of your hands. Then down here, we have the option for automatic exposure optimization. This is usually off. If you're working with JPEG images, you don't need it. Then there's a balanced exposure correction here if you have dark images or very bright ones. And the option on the right is for raw images, for raw photos. That lets you add an automatic row development, which brightens the raw image, which is usually very dark. So you can use it straight away. That lets you start processing your panoramas with raw images right away. Then we have this large area with our advanced settings. There's an area for the calculation quality, fast, high quality or maximum. Here on the right, there's an extra mode for blending 360-degree panoramas from left to right. Those of you who make 360-degree panoramas know what I mean, because they usually have a seam in the middle. Then we have our technical parameters, 2 of them, for adjusting the panorama stitching. The first is detail matching, which tells the program exactly how individual details in the images have to match when they're overlaid in order to be considered the same. That's the first slider. And the second slider defines how similar the images generally have to be at the seams for them to be considered part of the panorama. Below that, we have the blending area. When you stitch together several images with different exposures to make one image, you have to blend the brightness level. You can change its intensity setting here. The third setting is the default one, which works for almost every panorama. If you have really extreme differences in light, go one step further right. If you have less extreme differences, you can also make it a bit more balanced. And the last option, but definitely not the least, is the memory model. This lets you choose whether to generate the complete size of the panorama, a reduced version, or an even more reduced version in terms of size. So if you have a lot of images, but your computer doesn't have enough RAM, you can reduce the memory model. That generates a slightly smaller panorama, which will still work well for you. Let's do that now in the spherical projection using the reduced model. Let's choose 6 images up here. This is a panorama that was taken in 2 rows. The first was 3 images side by side, then the camera moved down a bit with 3 images further back. The program should be able to stitch them together as well. Our images are prepared. Stitching always begins at 40% on the bar, and as soon as we're finished, we get our stitch panorama. We can see in the bottom left that I unfortunately should have taken one more image. I wasn't paying attention, which sadly happens quite often. So one tip from me at this point, it's always better to take one more shot. It's definitely better than missing a piece later on, like our picture here. Of course, we now have to crop this image as we saw in the workflow video. Here, unfortunately, we need a lot of cropping because of our one missing image. And that now looks something like this. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you. To do that, let's go back to the panorama area and close the advanced settings. Let's reset everything down here on the left to the default values with the back arrow. Now I'd like to draw your attention to this button over on the right. At first glance, it looks a bit like an up and down scroll bar, but this is our vertical mode, the portrait mode for panoramas, which switches the program over internally. If we turn it on, the planar mode turns off. That doesn't work with vertical mode. Everything else does. And the program is now set up to stitch together panoramas from bottom to top, or from top to bottom. What do I mean by that? Let's take a look at this panorama here. 6 images in front of a church. This is quite common, where you take photos moving upwards like that. And usually panoramas are more horizontal. For these vertical panoramas, we've built a special mode that is really effective. Let's open these 6 images to see what it can do. Now, our 6 images are being interpreted as a vertical panorama, and the resulting image should be with us shortly. And here it is already. If you follow my mouse pointer now, my mouse hand, directly under the mouse hand, you can see that the image resolution is 6,000 pixels wide and 13,000 pixels high, so it's quite big. Let's zoom in to take a look. We're using the full resolution. You can really see the finest details. And this panorama, these vertical panoramas naturally have a special characteristic, apart from the fact that they're vertical. They curve up and away towards the back. And to correct that, you can go to the quick editing module and click RAW in the professional version. The RAW module opens. Open the distortion correction. There's a lens correction here. And if we move that to the right towards pincushion correction, we can see how it straightens out. Let's then apply that. We won't save that in the profile. And we now have a straight picture. We could also have tilted it forward, but let's leave it like that for now. Let's just crop it a bit on the left and right, like this maybe. And now I have a finished vertical panorama. Otherwise, if I didn't do that in vertical mode, I'd have another spherical projection, which looks completely different and takes much longer. So this vertical mode is a specially optimized variant of the program. In principle, it switches the whole program over internally. To you, it's just one click, but the program is completely converted inside. If you ever have problems with the panorama, if the calculation takes a really long time, or if you get a panorama back with missing parts where some areas in the image are just white, you can click the eye down here. This area then immediately shows you some of the possible issues that can occur. For instance, the images may not be recognized as belonging together if the overlapping areas are too small, or the graphics card may not have enough memory. You may then just get a white image, and that's what's listed there. Feel free to have a look. Apart from that, I hope you feel like you know the settings window a little better now. As you can see, there's lots you can do there. Have fun trying it all out, and see you next time.